Hey guys, Travis here. We want to thank you for joining us on these last several weeks as we explore what does it mean to be a living stone. Hey, we're starting a brand new series this week entitled Undisputed. We want to invite you to join in it with us. Hey, head over to our website, capacity.church, to subscribe to our newsletter. Also, in the link below, you can drop us an email if you just want to know more about Capacity and what we're doing in Nashville. Finally, if these videos are doing something to help you, or you know someone that they can benefit, please feel free to like, subscribe, and share them. Like, subscribe, and share. As always, we want to say thank you for being on this journey with us, and here's our new series entitled Undisputed. Hey, and welcome to our new series entitled Undisputed. If you're watching this video in real time, then you know that we are in a season of Lent, which is a period of reflection where we get a moment as Christians to think about the journey and to do some introspective looking and then celebrate the wonderful resurrection of Jesus Christ on Easter Sunday, which this year falls in April. You know, for me with Lent, it has always been a time where I've had difficulty really knowing what to focus on, where I've really just I didn't know what the journey would look like. It's not something that we always observed when I was growing up. But now, as I have matured and gotten older, I've realized that it's a very important time for us just to sit back and reflect and think about life in a different way, to prepare our mind for what Easter is and for the celebration and the importance behind it. And so this year I have been on a journey through the books of Acts, and it may be a little bit different than what some people do with Lent, because I'm looking at Acts after Pentecost. So we are talking Acts chapters 11 and 13 is where I've been looking at right now, and now I'm in chapter 14, where we are seeing Paul and Barnabas, and they have been ordained to go out and spread the gospel. They have had hands laid on them, and they have been anointed. And we see them journeying through the region of what is modern day Turkey. And the passage that we're going to talk about today comes from, they are in an area called Lystra. And so it picks up on chapter 14, and we're going to do chapter 14 verses 8 through 10. And so in Lystra, there sat a man who was lame. He had been that way from birth and had never walked. He listened to Paul as he was speaking. Paul looked directly at him, saw that he had faith to be healed, and called out, "Stand up on your feet." At that, the man jumped up and began to walk. And so this passage right here is actually one of the ones that I highlighted in my text, because it really came to me as, I guess, that one of those verses that when you read it, it kind of like stands out to you. And as we're doing this series on Undisputed, right? Undisputed meaning when you think of the undisputed champion of the world, it is someone who is without doubt, right? It is someone who you can undeniably say, this is the greatest example of a champion that we know of. And when I think of Undisputed, especially in Lent, I can't think of a better champion, anyone better, a better example of sacrifice, a better example of love than Jesus Christ, right? And so we're focused on what does an undisputed champion look like? What does that word undisputed look like in our text, and where can we find examples of it? And I think that this passage right here is a great example of someone who was not a believer hearing about Christ and is saying, you know what, this is without a doubt who I need to be tied to. And what is interesting in this passage is, I think that this is the second part of their journey, right? So the first part of Paul and Barnabas' journey, they are in Iconium, 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 right? So they're in that area, and they are preaching and spreading the good news. But they come across this crowd, right? These teachers or these elders, these people who knew of the faith, and they were not pleased with what they were saying. And so Paul and Barnabas, they find out that that this group wants to have them killed, and so they venture out and leave and head 30 miles to Lystra, right? And it's at Lystra that they're still preaching the gospel. And what I think is interesting about Lystra is that it was an area, like many areas, that had already had religion, right? They were polytheism, so it was also a Greek area, so they worship the Greek gods. So we have Jupiter and Mercury, or Zeus and Apollo, if you were going by their Roman names. And so this man, who we have no mention of his name, the only thing we know is that he was lame at birth, that he heard the message, he believed, and he acted, right? So he heard, he believed, he acted. That is all we have of this passage. And we know that he had already been exposed to another form of religion, right? And so when he heard this message that Paul and Barnabas was speaking, something in him caused him to want to listen more, right? And so my 3 takeaways from this passage for us today are very simple. When we hear the voice of God, we must listen, we must believe, and then we must take action. Listen, believe, take action. It's that simple. So we first see that this man listened. He heard the message. It was something that was so different. He heard about the good news. He heard about the Messiah. He heard about the need, about being exposed to someone, to an individual, to God, to a God that can change your life. And when he heard that message, it says that from what I'm interpreting, is that his posture changed. If you think about it, if he was lame, right, that means that he had to be, he either was seated on an object or a ground. Like he was somewhere because he couldn't walk, right? And so he was seated in a way that after he heard it, his body has changed, right? His however he was, his posture changed, and it changed in a way that Paul took notice of him. Right? So we don't know where he was, like if it was a huge crowd, if it was a small crowd. Only thing we know is that when this man heard the message, that his posture changed. And because his posture changed, he was noticed by Paul. Right? And so the question that we must ask ourselves is that when we're exposed to the gospel, are we changing our posture? Are we still slouched over? Are we still walking the same way? Or by us being exposed to the gospel, are we actually changing? Are we sitting more erect? Are we walking different? Are we talking different? Something should change when we're exposed. Again, something should change when we're exposed. And the only way that can change is if we are actually listening. And the reason why I think that this man's posture actually changed is because while he was listening, he was also trying to discern if what he was hearing was the same old, or if this was truth. And because what he recognized was truth, he then stood up and was more erect, right? So we have that piece. And then because he listened and he heard truth, he then believed, right? And so it also says that he listened to Paul as he was speaking. Paul looked directly at him, saw that he had faith to be healed. So he had the faith to be healed, right? And so we know that in Hebrews, it says that faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. And so we have to believe, I have to believe that by this man hearing a message that was so different, that he believed to be truth, that it sparked something in him that said, maybe even I can be changed. Despite my current situation, I believe that there is something that is so real about this that it can't help but have an impact on my life. And because he believed that, because he had the hope that this would happen, that something different would happen, that Paul noticed him, right? And so we also when we look at commentary, some scholars say that because where they were, and because what they had just been through, them as in Paul and Barnabas, that because of the man's current posture, that Paul recognized that this was a great place or a great time for a miracle to be displayed. That this was a great time for him to show to the people, to say, hey, you know, that this God is real. That the things that you hope and that you desire for, that you don't even have to speak them, that God already knows. And if we look at this passage, even these sentences, we see that this man never asked Paul for anything. He didn't ask. He was in a position of listening, but he wasn't in a position of begging, right? So we don't know what his financial state is. We don't know anything about him. We just know that he was lame. And so we see that this is actually a different man from the man that Peter healed, because the man that Peter healed was looking for something, right? He was looking for alms, but this man was looking for nothing. Yet Paul still said to him, get up and go, or stand up on your feet. And I think that is a great segue to our final point in this whole, this passage, is that after the man heard a different message, a message that he believed to be true, that sparked his faith, that allowed him to raise up in a different posture, then we see that this man acted on the word that was spoken to him. And for some of us, we have to get to the point where we are willing to act once a word has been spoken and once we have confirmed that it is true. So I can't help to believe that if this man had not got up and walked, that his body still wouldn't have been healed. I believe his body still would have been healed, but he would have had no idea that his circumstances had changed. And for some of us, we have been healed from certain situations that have been plaguing us, certain situations that we have actually hoped for. We have heard the word spoken over us, yet we are still in the same position because we haven't acted on what we've been told. We've been healed and able to walk, but we're still in the constant state of paralysis. Paralysis by inaction. And so today, I come to you to submit that because we serve a God that is undisputed, a God that is always the champion of every single thing, of everything in life, a God that was able to speak and birds began to chirp, a God that was able to bend over and reach his hand down and form man, right? And then breathe life into us. A God that can do these things, a God that is willing to sacrifice his son so that we can still be in a relation. A God that is always forgiving, always sustaining, that is undisputed. That same God that was able to give power to Paul to say, walk. And the man got up and walked because of faith. That same God is able to do the exact same thing in you and me. So what is the thing that you're hoping for, that you're waiting on God to say, get up and go? You know, in Lent, this is a great time for us to ask ourselves these questions, for us to find out what is our paralysis from inaction. And then for us to be like this man in this passage and listen, believe, and finally act. Listen, guys, this has been a very short video, but I hope it was something that was thought-provoking for you and caused you to really want to dig a little bit deeper into this time of reflection that we know as Lent. Listen, if you're in the Nashville area and you or your family or friends would like to find out more about Capacity Church, please head over to our website, which is capacity.church, and subscribe to the newsletter. If this video was helpful for you in any type of way, and you know of someone that you think this would benefit, who needs to act, who has heard a word from God but and believes it, then we want you to subscribe and also share this video to them. We also, we would love for you to even leave a comment down below and ask us to pray for whoever. If you need prayer, we'd love to pray for you. And then if you don't want your prayers known publicly, please send us an email at capacitychurch@gmail.com. Next week, we're going to dig deeper into this with my lovely wife, Kendra, who is not here with me right now. And we're going to go further into what does the word undisputed mean and how does it relate to God and to our wonderful Savior, Jesus Christ. Guys, as always, we love you, we thank you, and we look forward to continuing to share this message with you. See you next time.